Hi, this is Sutil Bhartia and welcome to TFR Let's Talk. And my next guest is Liam Randall, co-founder of Cosmonic. Before we start this conversation, I would also like to thank Linode, the alternative cloud provider who sponsor our flagship shows like Let's Talk and Newsroom. Liam, it's great to have you on the show.
It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Tell me a bit about the company. What do you folks do?
Yeah, sure. So Cosmonic was spun up to execute around the emerging opportunity with the CNCF wasmCloud project. And wasmCloud is a project that helps you to write software faster for the cloud and uses WebAssembly to run it everywhere securely.
Thanks for explaining that. Can you tell me what is the difference between WebAssembly and wasmCloud, or how do they work together?
WebAssembly is a technology that has been capturing the minds and excitement of developers everywhere for the last few years. It's similar in some ways to things that we've tried before, to Java, to Silverlight, to Flash, in that it's a run everywhere engine. Now, what's different about WebAssembly is that first, it doesn't include its own language, it's polyglot. But more importantly, it's a WC3 standard that's already supported today in all the world's major browsers. And its engine, like many web technologies, runs on servers as well. So this is an intermediate format that you can take code from multiple languages that captures it in a secure runtime that runs everywhere. So it's quite exciting. What we added to it with wasmCloud was a sort of a higher abstraction for the cloud. If we think of the last epochs of computing, virtual machines themselves as inspired by the cloud abstract away from a specific computer, and containers abstract away from a specific Linux distribution. And we looked at the next layer of abstraction, and we recognized that the libraries that you use to build your applications would be that next abstraction. So we give you a layer that lets you write pure business logic, attach it to contracts like Lego blocks, and then at runtime, plug in a specific component. And what this means is that developers can truly write their code once and run it anywhere, not just from a technology point of view, as in execution, but you can dynamically attach to whatever sort of local capabilities you might have in that cloud or in that edge device or in that Kubernetes distribution or in that browser.
And as you said, wasmCloud is also a CNCF sandbox project. How is Cosmonic associated with this project or CNCF?
Absolutely. So wasmCloud evolved out of a series of projects that were originally open sourced when I was working at Capital One Bank. And last year I left Capital One based in largely on my excitement for this technology. We sort of pulled together a variety of resources and relaunched the project as wasmCloud, and the developer inertia has just continued to accelerate. So at this point, we have contributors from large financial services, from power companies, from automobile manufacturers, all contributing and seeing this opportunity and this vision to write once and run everywhere. So this summer, the team behind wasmCloud, that was also the team behind Cosmonic, decided to put wasmCloud into the CNCF. So while we've been continuing to fund and we are the leading developers in the open source community, Cosmonic provides support for wasmCloud.
So the relationship between Cosmonic and wasmCloud is same open source story that we hear. You have fully open source project that anybody can use, contribute to, but open source can easily solve day one problem. Day two is the real challenge. That's where Cosmonic comes to play.
That's right. That's right. We think of wasmCloud is the distributed application runtime, and it's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly functional. It doesn't require you to start in a completely different technology direction. It's compatible with everything you use today, including Kubernetes. It gives you the ability, though, to start on your journey. Large enterprises, however, require a larger number of jobs to be done. If we think about a platform used to operate this at scale, they want central authentication. They want user interface. They want built-in monitoring, metrics, accounting, cost accounting, things like that. So Cosmonic is organizing those jobs to be done and delivering a SaaS type product that allows organizations to scale this technology very quickly in their environment so that they can start to save costs.
You alluded to that earlier, but I just want to go a bit deeper. If you can kind of also explain what exactly is server-side WebAssembly and what unique problems it's trying to solve in the cloud native world.
From the perspective of the cloud native world, we really see WebAssembly starting to show up and transform all of server-side computing. And we see it showing up in a couple different places. We see things like wasmCloud showing up at the application layer. So these are organizations that are committed to cloud native. There's actually a large financial service will be sharing some of their future architecture at the upcoming WASM Day for KubeCon North America. That's a good example. We also see WebAssembly being baked into existing applications. WebAssembly is a secure sandbox, and that it's polyglot, meaning that you can use multiple languages, makes it ideal if you have an application where you need to host other people's code. So think of things like Envoy or networking layers where you would want the ability to empower users to put in user-provided transformations or user-provided plugins. And those just plug very naturally into WebAssembly. And then we also see a future state where WebAssembly may, next to containers, be a direct orchestration target. And Microsoft has actually been leading the exploration in that area. They released a great project that's called Crustlet. And Crustlet was also just put into the CNCF. And that gives Kubernetes the ability to directly orchestrate and operate and scale WebAssembly natively. So why would organizations want to do that? We could already put software into a container, but developers today really are facing three great challenges. The first great challenge that developers are facing are that they have different CPUs that they need to compile software for. Even in the cloud itself, Amazon's now offering these Graviton processors that are less expensive than the traditional x86. They're doing their own ARM processors. Developers are also finding that when they need to compile and run their code, they need to run it on edge devices that may have different CPUs. They need to do all this securely. And frankly, they need to do it with less boilerplate. And those are the big three reasons that are driving developers to start to look for what is the next epic of computing. If we think of the last epics as being the data center where a developer, is responsible for the whole stack down to a specific type of CPU and RAID controller, and then virtual machines that let us abstract away from a specific computer and give us a measure of scalability. Containers are awesome, and they also embed certain assumptions. The software you compile to put in a container is targeted at a specific CPU, for example. Technologies like wasmCloud really give the developers more range of freedom while letting them just focus on the pure business logic that they care about.
Excellent. Also, when I look at this cloud native technology, it kind of reminds me of the old, they are not old days, but it's fun to say old days of LAMP stack. There are so many components that were there to build the whole stack. In today's world, we look at it, it's like Kubernetes, Service Mesh, wasmCloud, GitOps, Nats. So can you talk about this stack and how, once again, the story here is helping customers. So talk also about how this combination in the end helps customers as well.
That's absolutely right. Now, when we really thought, I gave the keynote for KubeCon EU, the WebAssembly keynote, and one of the themes that we really wanted to emphasize is that all about cloud native WebAssembly is really a better together story. This is not a versus story, although the technologies are not directly dependent on each other. We see so many opportunities, like I mentioned before, as applications, as embedded runtimes, and as direct orchestration targets where these technologies just work together. And when we were designing wasmCloud, we really embraced that mentality. wasmCloud functions on its own, completely independent, on an ARM, on a developer's workstation, or anywhere you would like it to be. However, we also know enterprises and enterprise pain really well. In a large organization that's highly regulated, you have a lot of governance and controls you need to align on. So when we were developing wasmCloud, we ensured that this is also a compatible with, but not dependent upon story. Because if you're a developer at an organization today, you have to start where your security department and your operations department and your governance department and your cost control departments are now. They're important stakeholders that we need to bring along with us. So with wasmCloud, for example, we're getting ready to release our entire Kubernetes operators, which gives you the ability to sort of use wasmCloud at the application layer, achieve almost all of the benefits and power of developing in a low-code environment that lets you just write pure business logic and bring it everywhere, and know that your operations teams that are going to deploy this can still run it on the corporate approved infrastructure today. It's a very powerful model that sort of represents where people are today and helps them build a bridge to the future.
One thing that I do love about this technology is that I also want to understand use cases, how people are using, where you're using, and there is no one better than you, because you have helped some really interesting organization, some financial institute in Europe as well. So let's start with some general use cases where it's being used, and then we can go specifically into this use case.
Absolutely. And when we're looking at, this is a pure, technical innovation that actually has use cases across all sorts of industries, and frankly, anyone who's building software. The first use case is a developer that simply wants to test an app or API very quickly. And one of the early demos that we're going to demo next week at our wasmCloud 0.50 release event on Wednesday, October 6th, is the classic Java pet store. And what's amazing is if you're a developer that's gone through one of those books, in the last 20 years, you realize that 95% of the application that you wrote has nothing to do with the logic of the pet store. And our version of this is incredibly concise and short because of wasmCloud. So wasmCloud helps you to build APIs and applications faster, regardless of where you want to run them. In fact, it gives you the ability to run them locally as like a microlith if you want, but to scale them horizontally or vertically is in a microservices model. We separate the deployment topology from the business logic to make that a runtime decision. So the demo that's going to be given that I really love at a cloud native WebAssembly Day is this large financial institution has not only a business imperative, but now a regulatory imperative. Their regulators in Europe are saying no more systematic risks in the banking infrastructure. So they're required to operate in multiple clouds. And they're going to do a live on-stage demo where they start with AWS and GCP, run the exact same code, implemented in wasmCloud, and then they fail right from one bank or one cloud over to the other. So this multi-cloud enablement is a wonderful use case for wasmCloud. But just as we help organizations and developers to run in different clouds, you could just as easily be running in different physical pieces of infrastructure. So if you have a distributed application, that is another wonderful use case as well. So those two problems are applicable to pretty much everyone in every industry that's building software, from the small hobbyist that wants to quickly build and run a pet project to large organizations that want to be able to independently scale and run their applications.
That was really interesting use case. Now, since you earlier also mentioned the announcement of 0.50 release of wasmCloud, tell a bit about. I mean, of course, it's still we are still from 1.0 release, but tell me what's new there. What kind of things the community is working on?
Absolutely. Over the last 2 years, as we've been building out wasmCloud and the ecosystem, it's been wonderful to have so many different organizations bring their requirements and their perspective to the table, because it's helped us to understand where do we really add value. And when you look at the architecture of wasmCloud itself, we've partnered with the sort of best of breed solutions to help bring new capabilities to our platform. So wasmCloud now includes on the back end Elixir OTP. Now that is known as a really high, like a hyperscale back end for applications such as WhatsApp or Discord. And we brought it because we had users show up in our community and they said, hey, I want to run this on 400,000 devices. And so when we brought those criteria into the ecosystem, we realized that we needed to align to some of those better practices. our developer experience has been improved significantly. We actually partnered with a project out of AWS here called Smithy that helps developers now to build and scale and model hundreds of applications and APIs simultaneously. And then we are also launching a new JavaScript-based host, which means that all of these applications that you're writing for the server or somewhere else can now run in your web browser as well. It really gives you a unique experience when every tab in in Chrome gives you the same capability as an additional CPU running in a cloud somewhere.
Liam, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk to me about wasmCloud, about the company, about the whole ecosystem. And I would love to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd love to be on any time, and I really encourage people to join us at wasmCloud.com. It's a great community. We'd love to have you as part of it.